The economy of Africa consists of the trade, industry, agriculture, human resources of the continent. As of 2019, approximately 1.3 billion people were living in 54 countries in Africa. Africa is a resource-rich continent. Recent growth has been due to growth in sales of commodities, services, and manufacturing. West Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, and Southern Africa in particular are expected to reach a combined GDP of $29 trillion by 2050. In March 2013, Africa was identified as the world's poorest inhabited continent. However, the World Bank expects that most African countries will reach middle income status, defined as at least $1,025 per person a year. If by 2025, if current growth rates continue, there are a number of reasons for Africa's poor economy. Historically, even though Africa had a number of empires trading with many parts of the world, most people lived in tribal rural society. In addition, European colonization and the later Cold War created political, economic, and social instability. However, as of 2013, Africa was the world's fastest growing continent at 5.6% a year, and GDP is expected to rise an average of over 6% a year between 2013 and 2023. In 2017, the African Development Bank reported Africa to be the world's second fastest growing economy and estimates that average growth will rebound to 3.4% in 2017, while growth started to increase by 4.3% in 2018. Growth has been present throughout the continent, with over one-third of African countries posting 6% or higher growth rates, and another 40% growing between 4% and 6% per year. Several international business observers have also named Africa as the future economic growth engine of the world. On the statistics, Africans have a population of 1.4 billion people, which account to 17% of the world population as of August 2022. While on GDP, Africa have a nominal GDP of $2.9 trillion and a per capita of 2.1. Now, on GDP growth rate, it's of 3.6%, while on the GDP per capita, Africa have $2,150. Unemployment rate in Africa is so high that it is 34.5% for unemployment rate in Africa. Now let's go to the history. For millennia, Africa's economy has been diverse, driven by intense trade routes that developed between ties and kingdoms. Some trade routes were overland, some involved navigating rivers, still others developed around port cities. Large African empires became wealthy due to their trade network. For example, ancient Egypt, Nubia, Mali, Ashanti, and the Oyo Empire, and ancient Carthage. Some parts of Africa had close trade relations with Arab kingdom, and by the time the Ottoman Empire, Africans began converting to Islam in large numbers. The development, along with the economic potential in finding a trade route to the Indian Ocean, brought the Portuguese to sub-Saharan Africa as an imperial force. Colonial interests created new industry to feed European appetite for goods such as palm oil, rubber, cotton, precious metal, spices, cash crops, other goods, and integrated especially the coastal areas with the Atlantic economy. A significant factor on economic development was the gain of human capital by the elites. Between the 14th and 20th century, there can be observed that in regions with more elite violence and hence higher chances to die at a younger age, the elites did not invest much in education. Therefore, their numericity as measure of human capital tend to lower than in less safe countries and vice versa. This can explain the different economic development between Africa region. Let's go to 20th century upheaval. Following the independence of African countries during the 20th century, Economy, political and social upheaval consumed much of the continent, and economic rebound among some countries has been evident in recent years. However, the dawn of the African economic boom, which is in place since 2000s, has been compared to the Chinese economic boom that had emerged in Asia since late 1970s. In 2013, Africa was home to 7 of the world's fastest growing economy. As of 2020, Nigeria is the biggest economy in Africa by nominal GDP, followed by South Africa in terms of PPP. Egypt is the second biggest after Nigeria. Equatorial Guinea has Africa's highest GDP per capita. Oil-rich countries such as Algeria, Libya, and Gabon, and mineral-rich Botswana have emerged among top economies since the 21st century, while Zimbabwe and the Democratic Republic of Congo are potentially among the world's richest nations by natural resources, but have sunk into the list of the world's poorest due to pervasive political corruption, warfare, and emigration. Botswana stands out for its sustained, strong, and stable growth since independence. Now let's go to the current condition. The United Nations predicts Africa's economic growth will reach 3.5% in 2018 and 3.7% in 2019. As of 2007, growth in Africa surpassed that of East Asia. Data suggests parts of the continent are now experiencing fast growth thanks to the resources and increased political stability and steadily increased level of peacefulness since 2017. The World Bank reports the economy of sub-Saharan Africa countries grew at a rate that matched or surpassed global rates. According to the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, the improvement of the region's aggregate growth is largely attributable to a recovery in Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa, the 3 Africa's largest economies. The economies of the fastest growing African nations experienced growth significantly above the global average rate. The top nation is Mauritania with growth of 19.8%, Angola 17.6%, Sudan 9.6%, Mozambique 7.9%, Malawi 7.8%. The other fast growing include Rwanda, Mozambique, Chad, Niger, Burkina Faso, Ethiopia. Nonetheless, growth rates have been dismal, negative, or sluggish in many parts of Africa, including Zimbabwe, Democratic Republic of Congo, the Republic of the Congo, and Burundi. Many international agencies are increasingly interested in investing in emerging African economies, especially as Africa continues to maintain high economic growth despite current global recession and the war in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia. The rate of return on investment in Africa currently is the highest in developing world. Debt relief is being addressed by some international institutions in the interest of supporting economic development in Africa. In 1996, the UN sponsored the heavily indebted poor countries initiative, subsequently taken by the IMF, World Bank, and the African Development Bank (ADF) in the form of Multilateral Debt Relief Initiative (MDRI). As of 2013, the initiative are giving partial debt relief to 30 African countries. In early 2021, the European Investment Bank, with the help of Making Finance Work for Africa Partnership, surveyed 78 banks in sub-Saharan Africa. For the EIB, Banking in African Study, the bank that took part control nearly 30% of the continent's assets. Almost 2/3 of banks surveyed tightened lending rules, but more than 80% expanded their use on restructuring or loan moratorium. Few banks were required to modify their employee level, while slightly under 1/3 adjusted their price. Approximately half of answering banks have employed guarantees, the majority of which came from the central bank, the government, or an international financial organization. Fiscal stimulus package in Africa countries to mid-2020 amounted to roughly 1 to 2% of GDP, with monetary stimulus amounting to about 2% of GDP. This is close to the IMF global average for low-income developing nations, which is around 2% of 2020 GDP over a 1 year period from the start of COVID-19 pandemic. At the same time, developing markets adopted a package worth around 4% of GDP, whereas advanced countries executed a package worth approximately 16% of GDP. As African nations struggle to address the health and economic repercussions of the pandemic, the average fiscal deficit throughout Africa increased from 5% of GDP in 2019 to over 18% in 2020 due to lack of fiscal headroom. The deficits resulted in increasing borrowing, which African countries have less capacity to absorb than other developed economies. Northern and Southern African countries have taken the most total measures to address the financial sector crisis resulting from the pandemic, with an average of 14 measures per country. 34 African nations have adopted steps to increase liquidity and lower borrowing costs, mostly through lowering the policy rates. South Africa, for example, has helped banks get through the COVID-19 crisis. Authorities limited dividends and other issues and other uses of earning, permitted to temporary release of capital buffer, eased capital or liquidity requirements, or made other temporary adjustments to prudential statements. Trade goods. Trade has driven much of the growth in Africa's economy in the early 21st century. China and India are increasingly important trade partners. 12.5% of Africa's exports are to China and 4% are to India, which account for 5% of China's import and 8% of India's. The Group of Five, Indonesia, Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates, are another increasing important markets for Africa's exports. Now, what is the future? Africa's economy with an expanding trade, English language skills, and official in many sub-Saharan countries, improving literacy and education, availability of splendid resources and cheaper labor force is expected to continue to perform better into the future. Trade between Africa and China stood at $254.3 billion as of 2022. Africa will only experience a demographic dividend in 2035 when its young and growing labor will have few children and retired people as dependents as a proportion to the population, making it more demographically comparable to the US and Europe. It is becoming more educated labor force, with nearly half expected to have some secondary level education at the end of 2022. A consumer class is also emerging in Africa and expected to keep booming. Africa has around 90 million people with household income exceeding $5,000, meaning that they can direct more than half of their income towards discretionary spending rather than necessities. This number could reach a projected 128 million by 2022 ending. With the introduction of the new Economic Growth and Development Plan introduced by African Union members, about 27 of its members, who average some of the most developed economies in the continent, will further boost economic, social, and political integration of the continent. The African Continental Free Trade Area will boost business activity between member states and within the continent. This will further reduce the reliance on importation of finished products and raw material into the continent. The gap between rich and poor countries is predicted to continue to grow over the coming decades. And lastly, entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is a key growth. Government will need to ensure business-friendly regulatory environments in order to help foster innovation. In late 2019, venture capital startup funding grew to $1.3 billion, increasing rapidly. The causes are of yet unclear, but education is certainly a factor. In summary, though African economy is growing slowly and steadily, but the current is the war between Russia and Ukraine is affecting African economy, and just like the world is about to face recession, it also affects so many African countries badly. And of which one of Africa, which is Nigeria in sub-Saharan Africa, is the poverty capital of the world, which are overtaking India. Africa need to build more on their economy. Now, this is what we talk about. We end it here at Africa's economy for 2022. Don't forget to subscribe. If you have your opinion, arguments, or any other suggestion, please leave it at the comment section. Thanks. Don't forget to subscribe.